That is a tornado right there, people.
This is in Ren, tornado behind us. Debris falling from the air.
It's 3:45 p.m. in Smithville, Mississippi, and something is very wrong. Sirens scream across the tiny town as the ground begins to tremble. Families sprint toward storm shelters. What none of them realize is that a monster is already bearing down on them at over 60 miles per hour. A tornado capable of digging trenches into the earth, hurling vehicles through the sky, and turning entire buildings into powder. And at this exact moment, just minutes before impact, no one in Smithville knows the terrible truth. They are about to face what many believe is the most violent tornado in recorded history. To understand how this happened, we rewind 72 hours. Meteorologists at the Storm Prediction Center are analyzing a weather pattern that's causing genuine alarm. A massive trough of low pressure is moving across the United States, and it's bringing with it a combination of atmospheric ingredients that shouldn't exist together. Extreme instability, unbelievable wind shear, record moisture, the kind of setup that occurs maybe once in a generation. By April 25th, a vigorous shortwave trough pushes into the southern plains. Ample low-level moisture from the Gulf of Mexico collides with fast-moving southwesterly winds aloft, creating convective available potential energy values reaching 2,500 to 3,000 joules per kilogram. To put that in perspective, anything above 2,000 is considered extreme. But it's the wind shear that's truly terrifying. On April 26th, the system continues east. Over 50 tornadoes touch down. Damage is widespread. But this is just the warm-up. The Storm Prediction Center issues a rare high-risk outlook. Then they do something almost unprecedented. They upgrade it, a 45% tornado probability. In their bulletin, they use words meteorologists rarely write. A major outbreak of intense, long-track, and perhaps violent tornadoes is expected. They have no idea how right they are. April 27th, a cluster of thunderstorms erupts. Within minutes, the cells begin to merge, organizing into a supercell. The storm is spinning, fast, and it's tracking northeast at over 60 miles per hour toward Mississippi.
Just to the east of us.
Man, you ought to see this debris up in there.
By 2:40, the supercell produces its first tornado near the small communities of Anchor and Dixieland. The vortex forms suddenly, initially weak, snapping trees and damaging rural structures. But within 60 seconds, something shifts. The tornado rapidly intensifies. Mobile homes are completely destroyed. Debris is scattered long distances. Large swaths of forest are flattened. Resident Jay Rogue begins filming as the tornado approaches his property. The roar is deafening. The family evacuates. When they return, their home is gone.
There it is. See good. Now.
At 3:19 p.m., the National Weather Service issues a strongly worded tornado warning. The language is urgent. A large and extremely dangerous tornado is approaching. After crossing County Road 159, the tornado begins showing signs of extreme intensification.
The dog's trying to get me in the house. Look at the debris, man. Oh, how much? Look at the debris way over yonder.
Trees aren't just snapped, they're debarked, stripped completely of their bark and branches. Well-built homes are leveled down to their foundations. Some are swept entirely away, and then the tornado does something that makes damage surveyors stop in their tracks. It begins ripping up the earth itself. A nearly mile-long swath of severe ground scouring appears. The tornado is moving at over 60 miles per hour, inflicting this damage in less than 2 seconds. Soil and grass are removed down to bare dirt. In some areas, the ground is carved into trenches. 4 miles away, local resident Greg Lambert steps outside and takes a photograph. The image reveals a monstrous wedge tornado, wider than it is tall, churning across the landscape to his north. The tornado crashes into rural communities at peak strength. Well-constructed homes are completely swept off their foundations. The ground is scoured. Vegetation is obliterated. And in one of the most extreme vehicle displacement events ever documented, a white pickup truck is ripped from Highway 45 and hurled through the air. The truck soars hundreds of feet, tumbling through the violent circulation before crashing to earth. Later, investigators will measure the distance. The vehicle had been thrown 1.7 miles, the furthest distance a vehicle has ever been documented to fly in a tornado. The driver is killed instantly. The first tornado finally dissipates at 3:39 p.m. near New Wren, Mississippi. 4 people are dead, but the parent supercell isn't finished, not even close. Something far more powerful is about to be born. At 3:40 p.m., the supercell encounters something critical, a thermal boundary left by storms earlier in the day. This boundary, invisible to the naked eye, is a line where saturated air and backed winds meet. It lowers the storm's base. It increases low-level wind shear dramatically. The already historic atmosphere transforms into what some meteorologists believe is the most extreme tornadic environment ever documented. If the supercell taps into this environment, the resulting tornado will be catastrophic. At 3:42 p.m., sirens begin to scream across Smithville. The supercell is developing a new area of rotation. A second tornado, a strange-looking cloud passing directly to their northwest. It's rotating incredibly quickly. A funnel lowers toward the ground, hovering just above the surface near the Tennessee-Tombigbee waterway. The tornado touches down at 3:43 p.m. CDT. Initially, the tornado is weak, snapping trees along the Smithville recreation area. But this weak phase lasts less than 30 seconds. The condensation funnel suddenly reaches the ground and explodes in intensity. The vortex drills a narrow but incredibly violent swath of damage, removing several inches of grass and soil from the surface. Trees are flattened, debarked, stripped completely, and then something unexpected happens. As the tornado passes through a dense forest, its core suddenly collapses. The intense wind shear rips the vortex apart. For a brief moment, it appears as if the residents in Smithville have just dodged a bullet. The tornado is weakening, inflicting only minor damage to low-lying vegetation. But this lapse in strength won't last long. Just as fast as it weakened, the tornado strikes a delicate balance between the powerful wind shear, trying to tear it apart, and the unstoppable power of the storm's updraft, trying to keep it together. And in an instant, a tornadic core of incredible power crashes to Earth. All the trees and vegetation surrounding the vortex are flattened, debarked. The core accelerates from EF1 to EF5 intensity in less than 6 seconds. At the same time, the winds inside the vortex become so strong and the pressure drops so violently that the ground begins to literally explode outwards.
All right, you better get your ass in the house. Come on now. We out here cutting. Look at the brief line.
A trench is dug into the surface over a foot deep and 170 yards long. Unbelievably, due to the tornado's fast-forward speed and relatively small size, this incredible feat of damage is inflicted in less than half a second. The tornado is now racing northeast at a brutal 63 miles per hour, and it's heading directly for Smithville. 3/4 of a mile to the northeast, Tim Nix and several others are frantically descending into a storm shelter. They catch a glimpse of the whirling gray mass racing directly at them. With just seconds to spare, Tim takes a photograph of the approaching tornado before closing the door behind him. There it is. Man, you gotta see this. Debris up in there. Employees at the Glover Wilkins Lock and Dam are filming what they're seeing. The funnel is morphing, growing, expanding into a massive wedge shape, and ingesting debris in all directions. The tornado has gone from a stout cone to into a massive wedge in just 23 seconds. At 3:45 p.m., the tornado impacts the intersection of Davis Road and Highway 25. The ground is deeply scoured. 2 mobile homes are completely swept away, along with a bed and breakfast. The debris is granulated into tiny pieces and scattered long distances downwind. 3 people are thrown into the air as their homes disintegrate around them. A mother and daughter are hurled into a nearby culvert. Miraculously, they survive despite major injuries. The 3rd person, thrown from the bed and breakfast, is killed instantly. The first fatality of the Smithville tornado. At the same location, 3 vehicles are parked near the bed and breakfast. A large RV, 2 semi-trucks. As the core passes, all 3 vehicles soar into the air. Despite weighing tens of thousands of pounds each, they fly for hundreds of yards. The RV and one of the semi-trucks come crashing to earth, deeply embedding themselves into the ground as unrecognizable husks of scrap metal. The second semi-truck is completely torn apart. Its bumper will later be found hanging from the struts of the Smithville Water Tower, 1.4 miles to the northeast. The rest of the vehicle is scattered across the landscape, ripped to pieces by the violent winds. Half a mile to the northwest, Jesse Cox is sheltering in his home. The core overtakes him. The decades-old home is no match for the ferocious winds and is completely swept away. The debris is granulated into tiny pieces. Jesse Cox is killed instantly. The destruction is so violent that the concrete foundation itself is lifted, chipped, and partially dislodged. All surrounding vegetation is completely debarked and shredded. The tornado continues into the main part of Smithville, encountering home after home. Each one is pulverized. Just ahead, on Highway 25, Jimmy Cowie attempts to race ahead of the tornado in his truck, but he quickly realizes he isn't going to make it. Jimmy turns into a driveway as his windows implode. His vehicle is lifted into the air and tumbles as if it were made of plastic before crashing back onto the road. Miraculously, Jimmy survives despite receiving a severe laceration to his head. But 3 more people around him lose their lives as their homes are wiped away. At one of the destroyed homes, a red Ford Explorer SUV disappears into the vortex. It becomes a deadly missile flying through the air. The compact but extremely violent core begins to inflict extreme feats of damage. Homes are completely swept away. Vehicles are thrown into unrecognizable balls of metal. The suction effect becomes so strong that curtains in nearby homes are sucked up between the ceiling and walls. Large trees growing along Highway 25, each weighing several tons, are not only completely debarked, but violently ripped out of the ground and granulated into wooden splinters. Nothing is left behind but dirt-filled craters lining the road. More and more debris fills the air, becoming deadly shrapnel. Homes, trees, and businesses are sandblasted by high-speed projectiles as the storm barrels through town. Crossing over Main Street, a manhole cover and its steel ring are ripped away, leaving behind a bare concrete hole. The Ford Explorer continues to soar overhead, still airborne, still tumbling through the tornado's grip. Half a mile to the east, a security camera at the Smithville Police Department captures the outer edge of the tornado. Objects fly across the screen. Then the video suddenly cuts out. 3 more large, well-built homes are obliterated along Main Street. Trees are mutilated. Driveways are scoured. Plumbing is ripped out of the ground. The foundations are swept clean. Fragments are scattered hundreds of yards away. Another life is claimed. Scattered across town, people scramble underground or to whatever shelter they can find. The ground begins to shake. A deafening roar grows louder and louder. One survivor describes the sound as if a giant hammer is pounding the ground over and over again, like a sonic boom that repeats itself. The tornado crashes into a row of mobile homes, claiming another life. It closes in on the Pearson family home, where Carla Jones is babysitting 3 children. With the deafening roar of the tornado quickly approaching and not enough time to make it to a shelter, Carla rushes the kids into the bathtub and lays on top of them in an effort to shield them from the worst of the storm. Despite going to the safest place possible in the large 2-story home, no structure is capable of surviving what's coming. The entire home is torn down to the concrete foundation. Incredibly, the home's anchor bolts are ripped up and swept away, leaving nothing behind but a clean slab and completely debarked trees. The 3 children disappear into the vortex and are found 100 yards away on a nearby baseball field, severely injured but somehow still alive. Carla Jones is killed. She was only 37 years old. She gave her life to save the 3 children. Simultaneously, the red Ford Explorer that was picked up half a mile earlier along Highway 25 slams into the Smithville water tower. The collision is so violent it leaves a large 6-inch deep dent into the structure's solid steel frame. The SUV bounces off the tower and is hurled an additional quarter mile before crashing to earth. The vehicle has traveled 3/4 of a mile through the air, tumbling through one of the most violent tornadoes ever documented. Spotting the whirling gray mass just seconds before impact, Michelle Whaley and her grandmother run across Elm Street for the nearest storm shelter. Unable to hear or speak to each other over the deafening roar, they watch in awe as cars, trees, and pieces of houses fly above their heads. Michelle and her grandmother are swept off their feet by the ferocious winds, but in an incredible stroke of luck, land inside the doors of the storm shelter, sparing their lives. Their neighbors are not so fortunate. As the tornado crosses into the town's eastern subdivision, it reaches its maximum intensity. The damage is so extreme it seems inconceivable. Deep ground scouring carves into the surface. Half a dozen large, well-built, multi-story homes are wiped off the face of the earth as if they had never existed. The tornado destroys the homes so violently that the debris is granulated into tiny, unrecognizable pieces. Not even the road is able to survive. The tar surface peels away into neatly compacted rolls. Of the 8 people in this area who didn't make it to an underground shelter, not a single one survives. Like a knife carving into the landscape, the tornado crosses Monroe Street and reaches the Smithville Cemetery and funeral home. Gravestones are ripped apart and lofted. The entire brick funeral home is granulated so violently that the bricks turn into a fine powder. The only things remaining on the property are a bare concrete slab and craters where trees once stood. Alongside the destroyed funeral home, a red husk of steel lies in a ditch among the debris and debarked vegetation. Unbelievably, this mangled ball of metal is the red Ford Explorer. The SUV has been crushed and flattened beyond recognition, coming to rest at the edge of town after its 3/4 mile journey through the air. Crawling out from the destruction, a man takes out his phone and begins to film the monster tornado. The roar is clearly audible from over a mile away. In less than 2 minutes, the entire northern half of Smithville has been completely destroyed, leaving behind a hellish landscape and taking the lives of 16 people. But the tornado is far from finished. At 3:47 p.m., the tornado exits Smithville and begins to track through rural forested terrain. It grows wider and wider before reaching its peak width of nearly 3/4 of a mile. Entire forests are flattened in its wake. To this day, these images depict some of the worst vegetation damage ever inflicted by a tornado. Darnell Collins, worried about her daughter Camille, the same Camille who recorded the tornado's first moments back near Smithville, steps outside and captures the violent wedge passing just to her west. This image becomes the most iconic photograph ever taken of the tornado. A massive, churning wall of destruction moving across the Alabama landscape. After crossing the Alabama border, the tornado's track begins to shift more to the east, putting the projected path straight toward the town of Hackleburg. But Hackleburg has already been obliterated by another EF5 tornado just minutes earlier. As the Smithville tornado approaches, the path curves farther north, sparing the already devastated town. The tornado is now moving dangerously close to rural homes northwest of Hamilton. Running to the back porch of a home, Scott Smith films the tornado as it crosses over Interstate 22. We're watching one go across about a mile from us right here. Right now. See debris in the air. Y'all better take cover. Although not as large and powerful as it once was, the tornado is rapidly regaining both its size and strength. 2 miles to the north along County Road 157, Dave Forster begins filming the tornado as it passes to his south. The video reveals that within just a couple of minutes, the tornado has morphed back into a large wedge. At the same time the video is being filmed, a large family home along Highway 19 is directly struck and destroyed. 6 people tragically lose their lives in this single house as the walls collapse onto them. Racing through rural areas at nearly 70 miles per hour, the tornado explosively re-intensifies, regaining its extremely violent core as it crosses and parallels Highway 20. Thousands of trees are completely debarked and flattened. The ground beneath them is deeply scoured. A collection of manufactured homes, along with vehicles nearby, disappear into the vortex, as if they never existed, scattering metal fragments hundreds of yards away into obliterated forests. Tragically, 5 one-year-old Rodney Abels is killed when his home is overtaken by the tornado. Moments later, his wife Sheila, who had survived the Hackleburg EF5 tornado earlier that day, arrives home only to find a bare slab where their house once stood. Continuing to cause incredibly violent damage to trees and rural structures, the tornado remains over mostly forested terrain, avoiding the populated areas north of Hackleburg before beginning to gradually weaken. The tornado finally dissipates 2 miles east of Hodges, Alabama, at 4:23 p.m. CDT. After being on the ground for 37.3 miles and nearly 40 minutes, the tornado has ended. But the destruction has not. All across Mississippi and Alabama, dozens of supercells in the same volatile atmosphere produce hundreds of strong to violent tornadoes. 4 EF5 tornadoes touch down on this single day. Philadelphia, Mississippi, Hackleburg, Alabama, Rainsville, Alabama, and Smithville. Untold devastation is unleashed across the region. 324 people lose their lives to tornadoes during the outbreak. Back in Smithville, the scene is apocalyptic. Those who survived emerge into a barren wasteland with everything around them completely unrecognizable. 23 people lost their lives in the Smithville tornado. Countless others suffered severe, life-altering injuries. 137 people were injured. The tornado destroyed 117 structures and damaged 50 others. The damage is nothing short of incredible. The tornado dug deep trenches into the ground, some over a foot deep. It threw vehicles 3/4 of a mile through the air. It obliterated entire forests. It completely swept away numerous well-built structures and granulated them into dust. And it did all this while moving at over 60 miles per hour. This combination of incredible damage and rapid forward speed, along with existing in one of the most extreme tornadic environments ever documented, leads many to believe that Smithville is among the strongest tornadoes in recorded history. Forensic analysis of the damage reveals estimated wind speeds of approximately 205 miles per hour, firmly placing it in the EF5 category. Ground scouring reached depths of over a foot. Anchor bolts were ripped from foundations. Concrete was lifted and dislodged. Vehicles weighing tens of thousands of pounds were thrown over a mile. Debris was granulated into unrecognizable fragments. Tar pavement was peeled from roads and rolled into piles. Brick buildings were reduced to powder. While other tornadoes have been measured with higher wind speeds via Doppler radar, such as the 1,999 Bridge Creek Moore tornado at 301 miles per hour, the Smithville tornado's combination of extreme damage, indicators, rapid forward motion, and the extraordinary atmospheric environment in which it formed place it in a category all its own. The National Weather Service officially rated the tornado EF5, the highest classification possible. The environmental conditions leading up to the 2011 super outbreak were among the most conducive to violent tornadoes ever documented. And on April 27, 2011, those conditions produced what many considered to be one of the most violent tornadoes ever recorded.